Hey guys, welcome to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The trees at the academia were wet after the thunderstorm. Ryo felt the sun hitting his face, telling him to wake up. Ryo sat up and stretched his arms. It had been 2 weeks since he left his gang and got back to the academia. He had the weekends to catch up with the piles of missing work. He was glad that Fubuki loaned him his notes and work. Ryo was glad that he had such a great friend like Fubuki. Ryo felt something moving around in his bed. He looked under the bed sheet and saw a chocolate-haired boy still sleeping. Ryo was surprised to see his friend in his bed. What is he doing here? Ryo thought as he removed the sheet. Ryo wasn't pleased with this and so, he decided to do something about it. Ryo kicked Fubuki out of his bed. Fubuki landed on the ground and woke up. Why did you kick me, Ryo? Fubuki asked while rubbing his head. What are you thinking sleeping in my bed? Fubuki thought about the question then said, I couldn't fall asleep last night because the thunder frightened me, so I decided to sleep with you. Fubuki smiled at Ryo and Ryo blushed somewhat. Why didn't you stay with Judai or Johan? Fubuki shook his head. I couldn't because it was Friday, and you know how those two are about Fridays. It's their day to sleep together and get naked. Ryo sighed. Fine, I'll let it go this time. Fubuki knew Ryo would fall for that. Fubuki pulled himself up and lay on the bed, closing his eyes. Now what are you thinking? Fubuki turned his head away from Ryo. I told you I didn't get to sleep until I got here, and that was around 1 a.m. So basically, I'm still tired. Ryo sighed and left Fubuki to sleep. He, on the other hand, went to the shower. Ryo let the water hit his muscular body and he thought how he could repay Fubuki. If it weren't for Fubuki complaining, he would still be in the gang and would never have left. Ryo got out of the shower and put on the school uniform. The uniform was just beige pants, with a blue jacket, and a red tie. Even if it was the weekend, Ryo still wore it because it was school rules, and he'd been in trouble for the whole year. He didn't want to mess up for the rest of the year. Ryo stepped out of the bathroom and saw Fubuki still sleeping. No matter what, he's fast to go back to sleep. Ryo headed toward the door and went out. Around the corner, there were two men watching Ryo carefully, a tall one and a short one who wore the same school uniform. What did the boss say again? The tall one sighed. He said, if Ryo showed any signs of weakness, we were to report to him immediately. The short nodded his head. But to think that Kaiser himself would have a weakness is impossible. The tall man rubbed his head. Will the new boss say that Ryo left because he didn't want to hurt someone close to him again? The short one sighed. Yeah, but didn't Kaiser hurt his own brother? Remember, when he tried to stop Kaiser? You remember that correctly. Still, you're right. His own brother was sent to the hospital. Yeah, so what'll make the new boss think that Kaiser has a weakness? I have no idea, but we are not here to question the leader's action. The short man nodded. Anyway, who you think Kaiser was talking to? No idea, but let's go find out. Both went to Ryo's dorm room. You think you can hack into the lock? The tall one said to the short one. Of course, it's easy. Unlike the main computer here, it's no more than matching the right code. The tall one let out a small laugh. You're right. For you, out of anyone, it should be a walk in the park. Right, Ikazushimaru. Ikazushimaru looked up and sighed. You still refuse to call me by my gang name, Kuimaru. Kuimaru looked down. Like I ever would, little brother. Ikazushimaru sighed. Anyway, the door is open. Both of the brothers stepped in. There's nobody here, Kuimaru said aloud. Are you sure he was talking to someone? Ikazushimaru nodded. Well, he must have been talking to someone via the cell phone. Then how can you explain the other voice? He could have it on speaker. Ikazushimaru looked away. Well, we'd better track down Kaiser and keep an eye on him. Both brothers then left the room. Fubuki crawled out from under the bed. I thought someone took over Ryo's place as leader. To still keep tabs on him is crazy. At any cost, I'd better make sure they don't see me leave this room. Fubuki turned his head and saw the tree near Ryo's room. Well, it's better than taking the water drain. He put on his uniform and opened the window, looking down briefly. I hope this isn't as crazy as it sounds, or looks for that matter, he started to climb down slowly, making sure not to slip on the wet branches. Hey Fubuki, what are you doing up there? Fubuki looked down, now regretting his choice of exit. Judai, what are doing here? Judai was on Johan back. I was getting a piggyback ride from Johan. Fubuki, still trying not to slip, replied, well, I was just climbing this tree. Judai looked at Johan. Hey, Johan, why didn't you let me climb that tree this morning? Johan rolled his eyes at his lover's poor memory. Because, stupid, the trees are wet and you might fall and hurt yourself. That's not fair. Fubuki's climbing the tree right now and you're not stopping him. Well, that's because he's not the one whom I make love to every Friday night. Besides, I told you that if you didn't climb, I would give you a piggyback ride for the rest of day. Judai thought about it, and then hugged Johan around the neck. Fubuki was halfway down the tree when another voice asked, what are you doing up there? Fubuki knew that voice. It was Ryo. Fubuki looked down and saw that he was right next to Judai and Johan. Ryo, what bring you here? Ryo held his cell phone in his hand. I got a text message from Judai telling me that you were climbing trees. Fubuki turned his head and saw Judai waving at him with a smile on his face. Judai, I'm going to kill you. So I will ask you again, what are you doing up there? Fubuki sighed. Well, however, before he could finish, he lost his gripping on the tree and fell. Both Judai and Johan cried out his name as he tried to grab on any of the branches as he fell, but his attempts were futile. Fubuki hit his head on one of the branches and was unconscious. Chapter 2. Fubuki was sitting in his desk in his old middle school. I wonder if Ryo will show up, but I doubt that. He hasn't been in school for over a week. I hope he's okay. Just then, Ryo stepped into the classroom, and, almost instantly, everyone backed away from him. Fubuki was not among them, however. Yo, Ryo, Fubuki said to his friend. Ryo just gave him a cold look and sat down in his desk. Hey Ryo, you can act kinder when someone is talking to you. To that, Ryo just looked up and said, why are you talking? Fubuki was taken aback by the question. What do you mean? We're friends Ryo, even if we don't hang out anymore. Ryo had a look of disgust on his face. I have no friends. Fubuki was shocked by Ryo's response, and he barely managed to hold back his tears. I shouldn't have come to school, it's a waste of my time. Ryo stood and walked away, not looking back. Fubuki just stood there, hoping to move, but he found that he couldn't. Fubuki woke up and noticed that he was in the nurse's office. Oh, yeah, I slipped off that tree. Fubuki, are you okay? Fubuki turned his head and saw Ryo sitting next to the bed that he was laying on. Ryo. Fubuki sat up, but he quickly regretted it. His head felt like someone had hit him with a bag of rocks, which wasn't a pleasant feeling. Idiot, you have a head injury, but it's nothing bad. The nurse said she wanted you to stay the night, though, just in case. Fubuki looked at Ryo, but then remembered his dream. Hey, Ryo. Ryo looked at Fubuki. What? I wanted to ask you, do you remember back in middle school when we had that fight in class? What of it? I just want to know why you would say that, and then still quit the gang when I told you to do so. Ryo was quiet, and he didn't respond for a while. Fubuki. The reason why I said that was because, just then, the door to the nurse's office opened. It was a young man with greenish-yellow hair. Oh, Fujiwara Yusuke. Fujiwara looked at Ryo and gave him a cold stare. Great, there at it again. Fubuki thought while letting out a sigh. Yusuke-kun, what are you doing here? Fujiwara walked towards the bed and sat down next to Fubuki. Ryo sat up and said. What are you thinking, Fujiwara? What, Ryo? It's not like you were going to sit next to him. Fubuki felt the air in the room getting intense. What was that? I wonder why he even still hangs around you. You were so cold to him. Ryo backed down. Even though he could easily admit that he hated Fujiwara, he could also admit that he was right. He himself wondered why Fubuki still was waiting for him to change back. Fubuki noticed Ryo's reaction and spoke to break the ice that was forming. Ryo, can you get something for me to eat? Ryo was about to refuse, but Fubuki gave him one of his smiles and he was instantly won over. Fine, but he'd better not do anything to you while I am gone. Ryo was pointing at the blonde head and went out the room. The chocolate-haired teen sighed and turned his head to look at Fujiwara. You know, Yusuke, it's not for you to decide what's best for me. Fujiwara looked at Fubuki, puzzled. Why not? It's his fault for causing you so much pain. That may be true, but I was the one who wanted to still believe in him, and I did things back then to make him realize how much pain he caused people. I just don't get. Don't you remember what happened after you had that fight with him? Fubuki didn't say anything, but he remembered. He remembered it all too well. Flashback. Ryo had just left the classroom and Fubuki was at Ryo's desk. He was trying his very best to not cry. Fubuki, what's wrong? Fubuki lifted his head and saw Fujiwara standing next to him. Oh, it nothing. Fubuki wiped his face with his sleeves. Are you sure? The chocolate hair nodded his head. You know what? I really just don't feel like being here today. With that said, Fubuki ran out of the classroom. He made it to the roof of the school. It's not like Ryo shouldn't be angry with me. I mean, I know I did say those things to make him upset. Really? Then it is your fault. Fubuki turned around and saw Fujiwara standing right in front of him. Well, yeah, I should have guessed that he was in a bad mood. Fujiwara stepped closer to Fubuki. You know, you sound like a housewife who just had a fight with her husband. Fubuki sat down and asked, Really? I sound like a housewife? Fubuki had a smile on his face which made Fujiwara melt inside. Yup. I even need to admit that you look like one too. Fubuki was quiet for a while. Then I guess you'd like to come over for dinner, Yusuke. Fujiwara nodded and sat down right next to Fubuki. I would really like that. End of flashback. You were crying because he said something hurtful to you, am I right? Fujiwara was now standing up, walking back and forth around Fubuki's bed. Fubuki sighed, I don't need to be reminded of the past. Anyway, Yusuke, I'm not the type to hold anything against someone. It's not right, I don't believe. Fujiwara backed down and let Fubuki cool off a little. Right then, Fujiwara's cell phone went off. Hold on, Fubuki, I need to take this. Fujiwara went out of the room. Yes, what is it? Asked Fujiwara. Well, boss, we might have found out Kaiser's weakness. Fujiwara rubbed his eyes. Don't you think I've already found his weakness? Besides, let me handle this from now on. You guys stand out too much. Fujiwara closed his cell phone. Who stands out too much? The blondish boy turned around and saw the blue-haired teen standing before him with 2 trays of food. Oh, nothing. Sorry, but can you tell Fubuki that I need to go? Ryo nodded as Fujiwara left. Hey Fubuki, said Ryo, entering the room. Fujiwara said that he had something to do, so he won't be back. Fubuki had his knees to his head. Are you okay, Fubuki? Fubuki nodded his head, not wanting to lift it. Hey, are you sure? Fubuki begrudgingly lifted his head and gave Ryo his smile. Yeah, it's just that my head hurts. The dark blue-eyed teen sighed. Well, here's your dinner. The chocolate-haired teen grabbed the tray from his friend. Why did it take you so long to get it? Ryo sighed again, but this one was bigger than the last. You can blame Johan and Judai for that. Flashback. Ryo was in line to get his and Fubuki's meals. Everything was running reasonably peacefully, until, hey, Ryo, how is Fubuki? Ryo turned and saw the emerald-eyed and the brown-eyed teens behind him. You're still carrying him, Johan. Johan nodded his head. He won't let go. I've tried, believe me, I'm so tired and it's all his fault. Judai looked down at his lover. Hey, you said you'd give me a piggyback ride. You didn't say when you would stop. That's it, Johan said and let go of Judai. Judai fell down on the ground. Johan jumped right on top him. This is your punishment. Johan started to kiss Judai's neck. Stop. Ha ha, that, ha ha, Johan you, ha ha, I'm ticklish there, ha ha. Judai laughed so loud that it grabbed everyone's attention. Jim walked over the little love fest. Oi, Ryo, like Johan said, how is Fubuki? Ryo shook his head. He's okay, but he will have a headache for a while. Jim nodded. So, did you figure out why he would do that? Ryo knew that Jim was very good at gathering up information. I figured out why he did climb the tree. Ryo looked at him. Basically, it was to protect you, but I think he should tell you. Jim looked Ryo, gave him a smile, and added, I think it would help your relationship with him. Jim then left Ryo to think. Ryo looked down and saw Johan and Judai making out. As long as it not like theirs. How the hell did that happen? Flashback ends. Fubuki was laughing. That's just like those two. Ryo looked at Fubuki, wanting to know what happened. So, Fubuki, I want to, you don't have to ask. I will tell you, but first you need to let me eat. Ryo gave him a smirk. Fubuki put down the food and let out a sigh from a full stomach. Okay. Now, I'm only going to repeat this once. Fubuki told Ryo about the two guys named Ikazushimaru and Kuimaru. Also, he told him how they entered his room too for his weakness. So, they're thinking that a person will make you go back to them. Ryo didn't say anything for a little, but when he didn't speak, it was softer. Then I am an idiot. Fubuki looked at his friend. I might have put you in danger, Fubuki, because of what happened when you fell. Flashback. Fubuki. Cried Johan and Judai. Ryo dove in to catch his friend, and Fubuki landed in his arms. Wow, that's impressive, said the emerald-eyed teen. Ryo looked in his friend's face. How cute he is. Okay, come on. Ryo didn't tell Fubuki that he was cute. Ryo looked at Judai and Johan. Let me take him to the nurse's office. The two nodded. Wait. Ryo, who's that? Judai pointed at two people running away, and at that moment, Ryo had a feeling that he did something wrong. End of flashback. The two friends said nothing for a while. Well, Fubuki broke the silence, at least it was me. Ryo looked at him in question. I mean, I can at least handle myself. Ryo got up quickly and leaned over to Fubuki. Are you idiot, Fubuki? You are now in danger. They are dangerous. It's not like something you can handle. Fubuki didn't know what to say. This was the second time Ryo sounded so angry with him. Ryo noticed how Fubuki was acting and moved back some. It's just, I really don't want you to get hurt, said Ryo in a softer. Didn't know what to say to that either, but he couldn't help it. He wanted to help Ryo no matter what. Ryo turned around. I really don't mind, because I somewhat like you. Ryo was surprised to hear that. He knew that Fubuki was comfortable around him, but he never thought Fubuki would like him. Fubuki, I think I kind of like you too. Fubuki got out of bed and hugged Ryo, and Ryo did nothing but hug him back, though all the while thinking, what am I doing? Still, I like how this feels. I think this what I've wanted for the longest of time. Chapter 3. Ryo and Fubuki were still in each other's arms for more than 15 minutes. Ryo knew that if he and Fubuki had a relationship, those gang members would go after him. Still, to have someone like him with him is what he'd wanted for the longest amount of time. Ryo looked at his crush's face. I feel kind of tired and lightheaded. Ryo also forgot that Fubuki still had the head injury. Ryo then helped the chocolate-haired teen back to his bed. Here, the nurse said to take this. It is for pain and aches. Ryo handed him the pills. Thanks. Hey, Ryo, are you going back to your dorm? Well, not yet. I'll stay until you fall asleep. Fubuki smiled and shut his eyes, and Ryo looked at him for a while. When we met, I didn't know you would save me. No, but I was wrong. You did save me once from my loneliness. While thinking about the past, Ryo went to sleep next to Fubuki. Flashback. A much younger Ryo was playing in the sandbox. He didn't want to go home yet. His mother and father were fighting again, and Sho was still a baby. He knew that all a baby could do was cry and pull his hair. Even though he was young, he didn't like being by himself. Hey, that looks like fun. Ryo lifted his head and saw a kid, about the same age, with chocolate hair next to him. Can I help? Ryo just nodded. Thanks. The boy smiled and started to help Ryo build a sand castle. So, what are you doing here by yourself? Ryo didn't say anything. He really wasn't sure if he wanted to go into it. Hey, my mom said it's bad to not answer someone who asks a question. Ryo looked up at that and gave him a cold look. The brown-haired child just started to laugh. That's funny. You make lots of funny faces. Oh yeah, My name's Fubuki. Fubuki then held out his hand. Ryo shyly nodded and took the offered hand. I'm Ryo. Fubuki's smile made Ryo feel better. I can tell you why I'm here, Fubuki said while Ryo went back to building the sand castle. See, my parents just had a baby. Don't get me wrong, my little sister is cute, but all she does is cry and pull hair. Fubuki nodded. How did you know? Ryo looked at him and, for the first time, he smiled at Fubuki. Because I have a new little bother. The rest of the day, the both of them built a sand town for their castle and talked about what they liked. Wow, I didn't think that we could build a whole city for our castle. Fubuki said excitedly as he put the last house up. Ryo nodded his head. This the first time I've spent a while with someone. Fubuki, at that, grabbed both of Ryo's hands. Then let's make a promise. Ryo was clueless as to what he was talking about, so he let him continue without a word. We'll promise that from today until we die, we will stay as best friends. Also, we will look out for one another when we need help. Ryo nodded his head. I promise, but now, I really need to go home. With that, Ryo waved goodbye to his new, and first, best friend. Fubuki looked back at him and waved too. Flashback ends. The sunrise lit up the nurse's office and the room where Ryo and Fubuki were in. Ryo felt the sunlight hit his head and looked up to notice where he was, and why he was there. I must have fallen asleep. Yup, you're right. Ryo turned his head and saw Fubuki looking at him. How long you been up? The brown-haired teen closed his eyes and thought about the question. I woke up about an hour ago. You are very cute when you sleep. Ryo couldn't help but feel embarrassed at the comment. So, how's your head? Asked the blue-haired, blushing teen. Fubuki shook his head. It still hurts, and I can feel a bump where I hit it, but still, I feel better than yesterday. Ryo sat up. Well, you did hit it hard. Fubuki looked at him. Yeah, but yesterday, the nurse said that I could leave. That's if you still take your pills. Yeah, I don't mind as long as it stops the pain. So then, do you want to go out to eat tonight? Fubuki looked up at Ryo with hope in his eyes. Do you mean it? He asked, wondering if he'd heard right. Yeah, I mean, I've been wanting to every day since you helped me. I owe you so much. Fubuki dove towards and hugged Ryo. Ryo, all you have to do is to stay by my side and never turn back to Hell Kaiser. That is thanks enough for me. Ryo smiled shyly and placed his hands on the brunette teen's hair. Ah, what a cute sight. The teens looked up and saw Fujiwara standing at the door. I hate to interrupt. Like you care, said Ryo in a low voice that even Fubuki couldn't hear. But Ryo, our English teacher wants you. I think he said something about a test. Ryo looked at his watch in a hurry. You're right. I have to go. Ryo turned back to Fubuki. I'll be back in an hour and I'll bring you something to eat. Fubuki nodded his head. All right, but you'd better remember you promise. Ryo smiled as he walked past Fujiwara and then left. So, since when were you two so friendly? I thought that anyone who touched Ryo would be turned into ice by his coldness. Fubuki looked at Fujiwara with a frown. Sorry again. I guess I'm just looking out for you. Fubuki lowered his head, annoyed. Yusuke, I already have a mother and a sister who try to protect me. I don't need my friend to do so too. Fujiwara gave an innocent smile. I guess you're right, he said, looking down from the window. Hey Fubuki. Fubuki lifted his head slowly. What is it? Who is that? Fubuki got up and went to the window. There, while looking down, he saw Kuimaru running across the campus. What is he up to? Thought Fubuki as he put on his jacket and then ran out of the room. Wait, Fubuki. Fujiwara shouted this after him, but did not follow his friend. Instead, he pulled out his cell phone and started dialing. Hey, it's me. The plan has started. Now listen, we only get one shot. He will figure out something if you fail. Now you know where to meet. I will be there. Also, don't let anyone catch sight of you. I have one more thing to say. Don't mess up, you idiots. Fujiwara then slammed his phone closed. I'm sorry to say, Ryo, but Fubuki won't be meeting you for your little date, thought Fujiwara as he exited the nurse's office. Fubuki ran out of the building, heading towards the gates. Flashback. The sun was setting at the middle school and Fubuki, with a band-aid on his cheek, was outside of the principal's office, waiting for Ryo to get out. Finally, the door opened. Yes, I'll make sure I won't do it again. Yes, bye. Ryo closed the door, looking at him. Fubuki. Fubuki turned his head. Yeah, what is it? Ryo made a frown and quickly grabbed Fubuki's arm. He started to lead Fubuki the restroom. Ryo, I don't have to go. Ryo just ignored him and pushed Fubuki in the restroom. Fubuki, are you okay? Yeah, of course I am. Fubuki smiled, but Ryo didn't believe his reply. Okay. Then why were those guys beating you up? Because why? I don't know why. I guess they just didn't have a good day. Fubuki, for as long as you've known me, do you really think I'm going to take that as an answer? It was true. Fubuki knew that wouldn't be a good answer for Ryo, but still, one can always hope, can't they? Okay, they beat me up because I told them not to make fun of you. Ryo's eyes widened. See, they have been making fun because your parents are fighting and of how you've been coming to school. Like today, they were saying how your uniform was really dirty. They said that your parents must be bugs and that would make you a bug too. Ryo didn't say anything, so Fubuki continued. So, I told them to stuff it where the sun doesn't shine. They got mad at me and asked why I would stand up for you. I told them it was because you're my friend, and they got even madder and they punched me. I got mad and I punched him back and then, his friend entered the fight. That's when you came in and helped me out. Ryo was silent and the two boys didn't say a word to one another. Ryo was the first to break the silence. Fubuki, you don't have to stand up for me. Fubuki nodded. Still, I'm glad you care enough for me to do so. Ryo then bowed his head to Fubuki. Thank you very much. Fubuki started to laugh. I've never seen you bow before. The blue-haired teen lifted his head and smiled. So, how about you come to my house today, Ryo? Ryo nodded his head and the two friends went to the chocolate-haired boy's home. 1 year later, Fubuki was waiting outside the principal's office, as he had the year before. The door opened and Ryo slammed it behind him before beginning to walk past Fubuki. Hey Ryo, wait up. Ryo didn't stop or even turn, leaving Fubuki just standing there waiting for him to notice him. Flashback end. Fubuki reached the back of the school, where Kuimaru was soon standing in front of him. Why are you here? Asked Fubuki in a loud voice. Kuimaru just gave a wicked smile. Well, you, of course. Fubuki then noticed that he had fallen into a trap. Ikazushimaru came from behind the teen and hit him over the head with a metal pole. Fubuki flinched at the sharp pain in his head and fell to the ground with a thud. I'm sorry, Ryo, I was careless, the boy then whispered to himself as he fell into a state of unconsciousness. Chapter 4. The unconscious Fubuki was on the dirty sidewalk. Well, that was easy, Ikazushimaru said while tossing the metal pole to the side. Yeah, he acted the same way the boss said he will. Yup. Anyway, grab him and help me place him in the back seat of the car. Kuimaru grabbed Fubuki and do as he was told. The brothers got into the front seat of the car. So, boss, said Ikazushimaru. The plan went as planned. Kuimaru turned around to look at the chocolate-haired teen. Who would have guessed that Kaiser's love was a boy? Fujiwara was smiling at the remark. Well, he's not gay, but he fell in love with this one because Fubuki-chan is so different than anyone he had ever met, said Fujiwara as he messed with Fubuki's hair. Still, no matter how much I hate Ryo, one thing he does have is good taste. Fujiwara lifted the chocolate-haired one's head and kissed him, and before letting go, he made sure to taste every inch of Fubuki's mouth. Just as I thought, said Fujiwara, releasing Fubuki's lips. He tastes as good as he looks. The car drove out and away from the school and the brunette's lover. Academia. Ryo was walking back to the nurse's office, after getting an A on his test. The blue-haired teen saw a young blonde woman headed in the same direction as him. Hey, Asuka. The blonde turned around and saw him. Oh, hi Ryo ni-san. Ryo caught up to her. So, what brings you here? You should know. My ni-san went and hurt himself, and now he has a head injury. Asuka sighed and kept on walking. Both Sho and Manjum called me last night and told me that he was climbing a tree and slipped and hit his head hard. So, I ditched class today and came to see him. Ryo knew that Asuka cared for his crush very much. He remembered that both of their parents went on many business trips and Fubuki was always there for Asuka, or it was the other way around. I'm glad that you saved him from his fall, Ryo ni-san. The blue-haired looked at her. Well, Ryo didn't know what to say. He just remembered how cute the chocolate-haired teen looked when he was unconscious. The blonde looked at her brother's friend and noticed that he was blushing a little bit. Well, at the very least, thank you for being there for him. Ryo's mind was still thinking of the chocolate-haired teen, and so, Asuka continued. Ryo finally looked at her. You seem very happy about something. Ryo didn't respond, but now, the blush around his cheeks was red. Let me guess, you like my ni-san, don't you? Ryo stopped in his tracks, and the blonde turned around and smiled. So, am I right? The blue-haired teen started to blush dark red. Well, to be honest, the blonde looked at the blue-eyed teen. He and I admitted that we both like one other last night. Asuka's eyes grew big. Yes. Ryo gave a questioning look in her reaction. I mean, I'm glad that my ni-san finally told you how he felt. I mean, he always liked you, even as a kid. Flashback. A young Asuka was messing around with building blocks when a young Fubuki came in and landed on the ground. Oh, hi ni-san, welcome home. How was the field trip? Said Asuka as she bent to talk to her brother whose face was in the ground. Fubuki lifted his head off the ground to look at her. It was fun. I had a great time with Ryo. Asuka gave him a big smile. I am glad that he is finally opening up to me. Also, I'm glad I made him go because he seemed to really enjoy himself and forget what his parents told him. Asuka nodded her head. I really don't understand why a parent would tell their kid that. Because they just think that way. Anyway, I'm really glad he is coming over tonight. Fubuki smiled and blushed a little. Hey, ni-san, do you like Ryo-kun? Fubuki dug his face back into the rug, but he slowly nodded his head. Ah, so does that mean I have another big brother? No, Asuka, he replied, his voice muffled, that's not how it works. Before Asuka could answer, there was a knock on the door. Asuka got up and left her ni-san on the floor. Fubuki could hear Asuka answering the door. Oh, hi Ryo ni-san. Fubuki quickly got up and tried to stand but fell flat on his back. Ryo gave Asuka a strange look as he followed her into the room where Fubuki was. Asuka. Asuka smiled at him. Why did you call me ni-san? That's because. Fubuki ran out of the room and grabbed his sister. Sorry Ryo, but Asuka and I need to make some snacks. So go into the room and wait a while. Ryo didn't have time to answer him, because he had already left. The young Ryo smiled and thought that Fubuki was messing around. Fubuki ran into the kitchen with his sister right behind him. Listen, Asuka, the thing I told you is a secret and I don't want him to know yet. Asuka nodded her head in agreement. Fubuki let out a big sigh. Now, little sis, let's make those snacks. Flashback. Ryo was quiet, though really, he was shocked to learn that his love was in love with him that long. I think that ni-san didn't want you to know because of what you were dealing with when it came to your parents. So he kept inside of him. Also, I think that's why he had such bad health while you were the leader of that gang. Ryo never thought that last year or so could have hurt Fubuki so much. Asuka could tell that Ryo felt bad for what he'd done. Still, you do give him the only thing he wanted. Ryo looked at her. I mean, he knew that no matter what, you'd be back to kind person you were. That's why I'm very glad you were there for him. Asuka gave him a kind smile. Well, we're here, said Ryo. He grabbed hold of the doorknob and opened the door. Where's the nurse? Asked Asuka as she looked around at the nurse's office. She told me before I left that she had to get some more medicine. So Fubuki was left alone. Even though I hate to say this, Fujiwara was here when I left, so he wasn't by himself. Fujiwara. Yeah, why? Well, when I got here I saw him leave. When I asked him where Fubuki was, he told me that he didn't have time to talk because he had a business meeting. Wait, are you telling me that he left Fubuki alone? Ryo shouted. Yeah, why? Ryo didn't answer Asuka, instead he went to the ward area. Ryo was in shock to see that nobody was there. Ryo Ni-san, what? Asuka stopped herself when she noticed that the room was empty. Where's Ni-san? Ryo looked around to make sure that Fubuki wasn't playing around, no sign of the chocolate-haired teen. Ryo felt himself also collapse when he finally realized that Fubuki wasn't there. Wait a minute, Ryo remembered what he and Fubuki discussed last night. I was a fool. Asuka looked at Ryo as he fell to his knees. What do you mean? Ryo turned his hand into a fist and started to hit the floor. Fubuki, he is in danger. Asuka was unable to believe what she heard. You heard me, Asuka, Fubuki is in danger. Ryo got to his feet. Asuka, I need you to call everyone you know at this academia. Asuka looked at him. Tell them that Fubuki is not here in the nurse's office and tell them to look around the school. Make sure that they search the whole school. Asuka could only follow Ryo's orders. Ryo went out of the room and headed towards the principal's office. Fubuki, wherever you are, please be okay, thought Ryo as he went. Fubuki. Fubuki slowly opened his eyes. What happened? He thought to himself as he let himself up. Fubuki looked around the room where he was at. Quickly, he noticed that he was in a lavish room. The windows went from the ground up, the ceiling was way up high, and the bed which he was on was big too. He also noticed that the sheets were all made out of silk. Whoever's the boss must be rich. Fubuki then noticed that something didn't felt right. He finally saw that he was wearing different clothes. He looked at the clothes that he was wearing, they were fine, black silk pajamas. Wait, that meant, Fubuki grabbed the sheets and pulled them over his head. I can't believe they undressed me, said Fubuki in a very high voice. Nope. We didn't. Fubuki removed the cover and saw one of the gang members. Who are you? The member shook his head. My name is Hanumaru, but in the gang, I am called Blaze. The chocolate-haired teen looked at him. What did you mean by, we didn't? Hanumaru moved a little bit closer. Our boss is very protective of you, so he was the one who undressed you. He's also the reason why I am here. Fubuki looked at him. He wanted me to make sure that you were okay. Also, Hanumaru handed Fubuki a bag. The boss wanted you, when you woke, to take a shower and change into these clothes. Fubuki knew that it was his only way to meet the boss, but still, he felt uneasy about what type of person the boss was. Okay. He agreed in a low voice. Hanumaru nodded his head and left. Fubuki got up and went to the bathroom. The bathroom was as big as his room back at the academia. He looked down at his feet. Ryo, Fubuki said in a small voice. He wished he would have rethought his decision. If he had, then he wouldn't have to be in the situation he was. Fubuki took off his clothes and got into the shower, letting the hot water touch his skin. He looked at what type of soap there was. To his disappointment, it was all kinds of soap that had either a flowery or spicy smell to it. Still, it was only soap there was. He got out and dried his hair before grabbing the bag and taking the clothes out. You've got to be kidding me, sighed the chocolate-haired teen. The clothes were black, and none other than a schoolgirl's sailor uniform, complete with matching black knee-highs and black dress shoes. Fubuki forced himself to put on the uniform, and to his surprise, it fit him, except he didn't like how the lower part of the uniform was too short and that it was showing his upper thigh. He got out and saw Ikazushimaru standing in front of him. Let's see, you look ready. Oh, by the way, my name is Ikazushimaru, but I think you knew that. Fubuki gave him a cold stare. Right, my nickname in the gang is Thunder. Fubuki just turned his head, not caring. At any rate, follow me, the boss is waiting for you. Fubuki followed him down what seemed like the longest hallway he had been through until they reached two larger doors. He is in there, Ikazushimaru said, nodding his head. Fubuki opened the door and noticed that there was a table and a meal for two. The meal was none other than his favorite food, curry with white rice, and for dessert was chocolate cake with strawberries on top. Okay, now I'm kind of freaking out, thought Fubuki. First the uniform, and now the food. Fubuki stared at the food, wondering if it had poison in it or not. What do you think, Fubuki-chan? The doors opened behind Fubuki and the chocolate-haired teen noticed the voice, causing him to turn around slowly while hoping it not the person he thought it was, but it was. Fujiwara was in the doorway walking in. He was wearing a black coat that touched the ground, along with black pants and a black t-shirt. Fujiwara stopped in front of Fubuki, looking up and down at the chocolate-haired teen's figure as he made sure that he could remember the image of Fubuki in the uniform. I knew the black would look great on you. Fubuki moved back until he hit the table. Yusuke, why are you the leader? Oh, come on, Fubuki-chan, let's eat and then I'll answer the question, said Fujiwara as he grabbed one of the seats and pulled it out, showing that he wanted Fubuki to sit. The teen knew that he wouldn't be able to get any answer from him unless he went along with it, and so, sat down. He slowly nodded his head, even though he felt like he was playing into his hands. Fujiwara sat next to him and grabbed a spoon, starting to eat. Fubuki, however, felt uneasy about the whole situation. What's wrong, Fubuki-chan? I thought you liked this kind of meal. Fubuki only looked down at the food. Fujiwara was getting upset, and he grabbed the spoon that was meant for Fubuki. Here, the dirty blonde said as he dipped the spoon in the food and brought it back up, say ah. The spoon was in front of the chocolate-haired teen. He closed his eyes and opened his mouth, feeling the spoon with the food enter, and then remove. He swallowed it, and to his surprise, it was the best curry he'd ever had. See, you do like it, now eat more. After the curry was gone, Fubuki felt unsure about what was happening. Yusuke, what's going on here? Fujiwara sighed and nodded his head. I guess you do have the right to know. Let's see, Fubuki-chan, you have always been such a nice angel to everybody. When I met you, I thought that you were a fool to trust everyone. Fubuki kept his eyes on Fujiwara and kept thinking that he was right. That he was a fool to trust the other. Still, at the time, Ryo was still good. So it was the three of us. I saw how much you cared for him, but then his parents got a divorce and abandoned him. Fujiwara started to mess with a napkin. Then, he turned his back to you, and he put you through so much trouble and hurt. He ripped the napkin in half. Ryo didn't care about you. He just pushed you aside. Fubuki was hurt by those words. I don't understand why you would just accept him back when he mistreated you. Fubuki looked down at the floor. Still, I can forgive you, but not him. That's why I took control of his gang when he abandoned them for you, told them that if they wanted to get revenge, they'd need to follow my orders. Then, I found out that he loved you to the point of doing anything for you. That's when I thought up this plan and that's why you are here. Now please, Fubuki-chan, admit that Ryo doesn't care about you. Fubuki looked at Fujiwara with tears streaming down his cheeks. Yusuke, you really don't know anything. He yelled. Ryo has done nothing but help strengthen our relationship. What we went through made me realize that I love him so much, and that I want nobody but him. I can never admit that he doesn't care about me. Fujiwara was pissed off by the chocolate-haired teen's words. He stood up and tried to slap him, but Fubuki stopped his hand. Really, Yusuke, I thought you knew that Asuka forced me to take some lessons in self-defense. The dirty blonde just smiled. That's why I love you, Fubuki. With those words said, to Fubuki's surprise, he hit chocolate-haired teen in his gut. Fubuki winced in pain and fell forward, but Fujiwara caught him and lifted him up, placing him over his shoulders. Now, Fubuki-chan, let's go. Fubuki tried to move, but the pain stopped him. He started to notice that he was going a different way than he'd come in. Yusuke. Fujiwara stopped at a double door. I'm sorry to say this, but one way to show you that he doesn't care about you is to do something to you so that he will never look at you the same way again. Fubuki didn't like how Fujiwara phrased those words. The dirty blonde opened the doors to the room. The chocolate-haired teen noticed that the room was really dark and there were no windows. The only light coming from lighted candles around a bed. The bed was the same size as the one Fubuki had been in, but the newly seen one had bars for the headboard. Fubuki had a bad feeling as to what was about to happen. Fujiwara grabbed hold of the collar of the uniform that Fubuki was wearing and tossed him against the bed's back. Fubuki tried to get up, but his stomach was still hurting him and now his back was in pain too. Fujiwara, acting on the moment, placed himself on top of Fubuki. Before the chocolate-haired teen could get an idea of what going on, he felt both of his hands above his head and felt handcuffs around his wrists. He looked up and saw Fujiwara right above him, and that was what made it finally hit him. Yusuke. Don't, please. Fujiwara looked at him and gave a wicked smile. I won't if you say that Ryo doesn't care about you. Fubuki just stared into his eyes. No, I won't. Fujiwara slapped Fubuki across the face before grabbing the top of the uniform and tearing it in two. Fubuki felt Fujiwara touch his chest as the dirty blonde leaned forward and forced his lip on the brunette's. Tears streamed down from his eyes, and Fujiwara noticed, reacting by beginning to lick his cheek. The brunette winced, but Fujiwara only continued and licked down until he hit the neck. He started to kiss and suck there, and then he made his way to the shoulder area. There, he kissed one part until he bit down hard. Fubuki held in his scream, but more tears flowed down. Fujiwara licked his lips to taste the blood before he moved back and down to the other shoulder. This time, he bit down harder, causing Fubuki to break and let out a bone-chilling scream, which made Fujiwara happy, but still not satisfied. Fubuki now breathed hard and he honestly didn't know if he was crying or sweating. Now tell me, Fubuki, does he care about you? Fubuki looked at him and said, quietly, yes. The dirty blonde punched Fubuki once again in the gut, causing him to cough up blood. Fujiwara grabbed one of the chocolate hair teen legs and removed both the shoe and the stocking and then licked down from hip to foot. Fubuki started to breathe hard, knowing that Fujiwara wouldn't stop, but he couldn't admit that Ryo didn't care about him. During this time of thinking, Fujiwara had already removed the other shoe and stocking. One more time, Fubuki, does Hell Kaiser Ryo care about you? Fubuki lifted his head and nodded it, saying, yes, he does, he will save me. Fujiwara dove down and kissed the brunette once again. Fubuki tried to stop him from entering his mouth, but the pain he felt prohibited him from doing so. Fujiwara moved his hands down to Fubuki's hips and removed the last pieces of clothing. Fubuki shut his eyes tightly as Fujiwara grabbed a hold of him, and Fujiwara continued to kiss him as he moved his hand back and forth. Fubuki wanted to scream, but the kiss kept it in. Then, Fubuki felt something inside him. Fujiwara had put two of his fingers into the small opening. Fubuki was breathing hard and couldn't believe what was happening. Fujiwara removed the two fingers and slid inside his prey. Fubuki felt hatred course throughout his entire body, and he let out a scream that could have broken glass. Fujiwara pulled down the chocolate hair teen's hips, causing Fubuki to lose the ability to stay conscious and fall into darkness. Fujiwara removed himself and put on his clothing. He opened the door and standing before him were Ikazushimaru and Kuimaru, waiting for their orders. Thunder, I want Fubuki-chan's cell phone and the voice changer. Frost, I want you to go get the pajamas that he was wearing. The two brothers went, and Fujiwara turned back and looked at the poor, unconscious teen. Academia. Ryo had explained the whole situation to Principal Samahima. Ryo, from what you've told me, I have to bring the police into this. Ryo hated the police, but he knew it was the only way to save his love. I'm fine with it. Just then, the whole gang come in. So anything. Everyone looked at one another and shook their heads. I thought so. Please, Principal Samahima, call the police. The principal nodded his head and was about to grab the phone when Ryo's cell went off. Ryo looked at it and noticed the number. Fubuki. Everyone's attention flew to Ryo, and so, he put the phone on speaker. So sorry, Hell Kaiser, but this is not your boyfriend. Ryo was displeased with the person on the other end of the line. Still, if you want to see him, I'll send you a picture. Just then, Ryo's phone showed new picture. He and the gang looked at the picture, but soon wished that they didn't. The picture was of Fubuki, but in his weakened state. You bastard, yelled Ryo, why the hell did you that do to him? Now, Kaiser, I didn't do anything to harm him or. Don't give me that bullshit. I sure as hell can tell what you did rape him. Asuka let out a scream. Well, if you want to save him, then I'll call back later and tell you what to do. Ryo heard a beep sound and closed the phone. He stood there and punched the wall which made his hand bleed. Fubuki, I will find you and save you from that hell hole. Fubuki. Fubuki woke up and felt his body in pain. The word, name, really, Ryo, being all he said before falling back into the blackness. Chapter 5. Ryo was pissed off as he walked down the hallway to his room. Asuka and the other fell from a good distance. He slammed the door behind him. The group waited, finally when he come out. It was in his long black jacket with the black pants. In other word his Hell Kaiser clothing. Ryo ni-san, wait up, said the blonde now trying to catch up, we know that you are mad but. But what Asuka? Yelled the indigo-haired teen, you know why they did this. It's because whoever the damn stick-mind leader is, knew that won't make me love him and that I would go straight to him. No one would admit it but Ryo was right in everything he just said. Still they didn't know that Ryo cared so much for Fubuki. Ryo ni-san, I am. You don't have to say anything. I am more angry with myself than anything. Why? It's not your fault that this happened. Because, he folded his arms, 'cause I wasn't able to protect him this time, unlike the last time. This time, what are you talking about? Well, he almost got raped, before. The group was shocked. What? When did this happen? About 3 years ago. Flashback. Ryo was walking through the hallway of middle school. He saw a couple of girls talking. Can you believe it? Said one girl. Nope, said the other girl. Why do you think he did it? I have no idea. The indigo-haired teen wondered what they were talking about. He made his way to his classroom and opened the door. When he stepped in, everyone in the classroom turned to look at him. The boy students were laughing while the girls were giggling. Now Ryo was wondering what was going on. When he reached his desk, he finally got what was going on in the school. Sitting on top of Ryo's desk, in black, high socks, in a blue and white sailor girl's uniform with a bow made of ribbon was Fubuki. Ryo was stunned. His best friend was at his desk wearing the girl's uniform. What in God's name is he thinking? Thought Ryo as he reached his desk. Fubuki turned around and saw Ryo. The brunette jumped off the desk and grabbed Ryo's hand, looked at him and smiled. Ohayo gozaimasu, Ryo-kun, said the brunette in a hyperactive tone. Ryo removed his hands from the brunette's smooth ones. The indigo-haired teen took a deep breath. Fubuki covered his ears knowing too well what the other teen was about to do, and shouted, what the hell are you doing in those clothes? Fubuki removed his hands. Let's see, to be honest this was your doing. Oh, this time it was me, the brunette nodded his head. Okay, explain to me how this is my doing. Remember yesterday while we were walking home and one of our random conversations was dressing in the other sexy's clothing? Ryo then noticed how Fubuki was going to blame him for his choice of clothing. You wondered how they could be wearing the other's clothing. So when I got home I was thinking and I want to see why they like it. So you tried to experiment. Fubuki nodded his head. So, great Dr. Fubuki, what is the outcome? I have to say, Ryo raised himself for the answer, I can see why they like it too. Girls have better movement with these things. In addition, I like it how they get to wear a ribbon with it. Fubuki smiled, while Ryo hit his hand to his head. Ryo looked at his friend and smiled. I have to be careful in what I say around you, don't I? The chocolate-eyed teen looked at him. It took that long for you realize that. Ryo let out a chuckle. Okay, now tell me why you greeted me like you did. Fubuki thought about for a moment, cause Ryo-kun. Before Ryo realized it, Fubuki had gone up to him and kissed his cheek, cause Ryo-kun is my knight in shining armor. The whole class was stunned, as well as Ryo. Fubuki pulled out a camera and took a picture of the stunned indigo-haired teen. What? Why did you do that, Fubuki? Putting the camera away he replied, well I want a funny picture of you, and you never shown me that expression before. The brunette looked at his friend and noticed black flames coming for him. That's no good. Tenjoin Fubuki give me that picture. Fubuki was going to say something but ran off instead. Ryo ran after his friend. Fubuki turned a tight corner and slid off course causing him to trip. Ryo ran up to him. You okay, Fubuki? The brunette nodded. Yeah, just a normal trip and nothing broken or scathed. Ryo sighed and grabbed the chocolate-haired teen off of the ground. Do you want the pic? Asked Fubuki. No, you can have it. Fubuki looked at his friend. Yeah I know, why will Ryo-kun let me have this? Well let's say it I owe you something. The brunette smiled. Well, if you are in such a good mood, would you let me ride your back? Ryo sighed as he turned around and knelt down. Fubuki looked at his friend. Are you serious? The indigo-haired teen nodded. Well, if you are sure, smiled the brunette as he jumped on his friend back. Thanks, Ryo. The rest of the day just flew by. The teachers were surprised to see Fubuki wearing the girl's uniform, but the brunette simply told them that the rules say, students must wear the uniform, it doesn't say what type of uniform. The whole class agreed and the teachers gave in. Ryo even gave into the whole uniform idea. He hated to admit it, but he thought Fubuki was cute in it. The school day was over, the indigo-haired teen and the cross-dressing teen were walking home. They were talking about random stuff. Ryo was making sure not to say anything to make Fubuki dress out of the ordinary again. So Ryo-kun, you never told me what you think. Ryo stopped to look at Fubuki and sighed, you know you look too much like a girl, who have no breasts. Fubuki was stunned because of his best friend's brutal honesty. Still, Ryo just walked ahead without finishing what he was going to say. Hey Ryo, that not fair. Finish what you were going to say. I don't have to Fubuki, and you can never make me. Smiled Ryo as he walked faster. Still he is just too cute for words, thought Ryo as Fubuki caught up. They reached an intersection then both Ryo and Fubuki stopped. Well, I guess I will see you tomorrow, said Fubuki, who was about to leave. Hey Fubuki, the brunette stopped, is Asuka even home, and don't lie to me. The brunette smiled and shook his head. Really, where is she? Well, mom and dad asked if she wanted to go on a vacation to France, and she said yes. And they didn't ask you. Of course they did, but I didn't want to. It's because, Fubuki turned around and hugged Ryo, cause there's no way I could leave you alone. Ryo sighed. He knew too well that when he told Fubuki what his parents thought about the indigo-haired teen, that Fubuki would stay by him. Said okay that I stay here, said chocolate-haired teen as he let go of his friend. Alright, but don't you think it's better if you stay at my house tonight? Nope, it's okay. Beside, I think your parents won't allow me over anymore if I come in like this. Yeah, you're right, but call me as soon as you get home. Okay. Then I'll see you later, Ryo-kun. Both friends went their own way home. After crossing the street and heading home, Ryo remembered something. He opened his bag and pulled out a book. Fubuki wanted to borrow this, thought Ryo. Therefore, he turned around and headed back to where he left his friend. He reached the intersection and headed the way Fubuki went. This is strange, he thought as he ran, he couldn't be that far, so where is he? Along the road the indigo-haired teen passed an alley. Then he heard a trash can fall over. He stopped and poked his head into the alley. To his surprise he saw the brunette with two older males. They were forcing the brunette down to the ground. Get the hell off of me. You both are sick. Ryo heard the cries of his friend. Well, you got quite a mouth on you. Fubuki managed to kick one off him, but the other grabbed both of the chocolate-haired boy's arms behind him. Wow. He said, spitting blood out of his mouth. You have strong legs, he said, touching Fubuki's leg from his bottom to under his thigh, causing shivers go down the chocolate-eyes teen back. I'll look at his face. Fubuki hated this and his face show this. Keep on making those faces and you cute face would stay like that. Well, if my face stayed like this, then it's still better than yours. A smirk went across his face, and the stranger liked that. Well, if you don't care for your face then, he raised his fist. Fubuki closed his eyes. Then you don't mind if I hit it for that smart-ass attitude of yours. He swung, but instead of feeling hurt, Fubuki heard a loud smack. His chocolate eyes opened and saw the person on the ground with a trash lid next to his head. The person who saw the whole thing turned his head in the direction where the lid came from. Hey, who the hell are you? He yelled and Fubuki turned his head. He sighed in relief. There in the opening of the alleyway, was the indigo-haired teen. He didn't look happy. His eyes were narrowed and filled with hatred. Get the hell away from him. His voice sent terror to the older men. Oh. Okay, we'll get out of your way. He pulled, mostly dragged, his friend out of the alley. When he crossed path with Ryo, their eyes met, and he ran the hell away. Ryo took a deep breath before walking to his best friend. Where is your bag? His voice was back to its calm tone. He pointed to a mountain of boxes. Ryo saw it and grabbed it. Then he came back. He stopped in front of Fubuki and turned around. Hop on. Without asking, the chocolate-haired teen wrapped his around the dark blue-eyed boy's neck. The rest of the way to Fubuki's home, neither of the two teens spoke to one another. They stopped a few times for Ryo to readjust Fubuki so he wouldn't fall off his back. They finally reached the front door. He handed Fubuki his bag to get the key. Not once until they reached the chocolate-haired teen's room did he let Fubuki off his back. He put him down on the chocolate-eyed person's bed. "Are you okay?" Ryo finally said. Fubuki only shook his head. "Did they do anything to you?" He stumbled over his words. He received no nod from his friend. Thank goodness. He embraced the other teen. Surprise filled Fubuki's eyes before they filled with tears. He hugged Ryo back and dug his face into the indigo-haired teen's chest. "It all right, it won't ever happen again. I promise you, no matter what, I'll make sure no one hurts you this way again." End of flashback. Fubuki woke up remembering that winter day. "It's been 3 years since I had that dream. Ryo even saved me back then," he thought as he rose up from the bed. His chocolate eyes scanned the room, which he was in. It was back to the beginning, the same room where he first woke from this nightmare. The door opened. Standing at the doorway was the mustard-colored hair teen. Fubuki moved as far as he could from the bed, still hurting from last night's action. "What's wrong, Fubuki-chan? I thought you gave people who hurt you badly a second chance." "Only Ryo-kun and nobody else," his words hissed out, angry at his formal friend. Fujiwara shook his head. "Really? It's Ryo's fault that you're here." He walked over to Fubuki, who was paralyzed with fear and last night's action. He started to play with a strand of the chocolate-eyed teen's hair that was near his high cheek. His chocolate eyes looked into the purple orbs and saw hatred in them. Then the dirty blonde teen's hand started to rub his cheek. "You look cute with fear in those big chocolate eyes." His face was now few inches away. Fujiwara put himself on top of Fubuki. "I would love to play with you, but..." He pulled out a cloth and poured something on it. "You did wake up early than I expected you would." Suddenly Fujiwara placed the cloth over Fubuki's mouth. The chocolate-haired teen smelled the cloth. "Damn," he thought, "this has chloroform on it." As his brain slowed down, his body started to feel numb. His eyes were struggling to stay open. Fujiwara smiled as Fubuki fell back to sleep. "Oh, my little brunette, you fall back to sleep." He grabbed a hold of Fubuki's chin, as his eyes scanned the structure of the sleeping teen's face. "You didn't even get a chance to change into new clothes, but I guess I'll have to do that for you. Still, I have someone to call." He pulled out the brunette's cell phone, a press 1 on speed dial. Back at the school, the gang was surprised over Ryo's story. Asuka, who thought she knew everything about her older brother, was in shock. "Why?" Her tone was calm. Ryo looked at her. "Why didn't he tell me?" "2 reasons. She looked at the teen. 1, he didn't want you or your parents to worry about him. She nodded her head, knowing her brother this would be true. 2nd, is that he thought your parents would have taken you and him away. He didn't to 2, leave me." His last word come out quiet, but enough for everyone to hear. Rinning. Rinning. Ryo looked at his cell phone and Fubuki's name flashed on the screen. He put his finger to his lips, telling everyone to keep quiet. "Yes, you pervert." His voice was cold and cruel. "Oh, that's not the way to talk to the person who has your Fubuki right next to him." Fujiwara was once again using a voice changer. "How am I supposed to talk to the person who kidnapped him?" "Well, more pleasant, and you're supposed to say, please don't hurt him. I'll do anything, just please don't hurt him." "More like that," Fujiwara said in an annoying tone. "Like hell. If you know me like you should, you know I'll never said that." "True, that's why you are so fun to mess around with. So are you ready to get back your dear boyfriend? Just tell me the place and time, and you'll see the true strength of Hell Kaiser Ryo." "Oh, Hell Kaiser, I thought you would never use that name again." "If it's for Fubuki's protection, then I'll be Hell Kaiser once more." "Good to hear that, but you'll have to face 4 people before getting to face me. So let the game begin. If you beat the 4 people and me, you can get your Fubuki back. If you still do. Now I'll give you a riddle. The riddle will contain the location for your opponent. Beat him to get the next one. Well, this going to be easy. Not so fast, you have a time limit to find the person and beat him. If time runs out, you'll lose and I can keep your dearest Fubuki. Understand? You're sick. People are not pieces to your sick game. What do you mean? I just want to see what extremes you would go to get Fubuki back. That all and nothing less. His tone was cold and hard. Now here's your first riddle. Temperature is an important part of this building. It has to be just right if you don't want your product to get ruined. Now you have 45 minutes. Hope you lose. The line went quiet. Ryo put his phone away and headed to the entries to the school. Wait, Ryo-ne-san, yelled Asuka. He stopped in his tracks. What? He hissed. Are you sure about this? I mean, what if it's a trap? I'm not sure if it is, but I have to go. Also, you stay here. This is between me, that guy, and Fubuki. So please stay here. Asuka was about to yell when she felt Jim stop her and shake his head. Okay, Ryo, but take this. He handed the indigo-haired teen his cell phone, just in case if they have your phone tapped. Also keep us updated for the riddles, we might be able to help. Ryo nodded his head. I don't have to tell you the answer to the first riddle. Ryo smirked. Okay, there's two, but they are on the same street, but the one on the right is still working. Your information network is great as always. So please try to find out who's behind this so we can end this game early. Of course, besides with the help from this gang I'll be able to find out in no time flat. Ryo left knowing that whoever is behind this had better be worried. So off to the abandoned ice factory, thought Ryo as he ran off to east side of the city. Chapter 6. Ryo arrived at the abandoned ice factory. This bring back old memories, he thought while opening the door. He stepped in the factory and thought out loud, a minute before the fight started. Ryo said out loud knowing that his enemies was there, knowing who you about to fighting is a good waste of time. Isn't that what you used to say, Koromaru? The ice-haired teen stepped come out with a smirk on his face. Well, yes, but who to say it was going to be your time you are wasting? Ryo looked at Koromaru with an unfriendly glare. You're right, it not my time that I am wasting, so you give in now so that I don't waste more of it. Koromaru just let out a laugh. Now Kaiser, I not the as I was back then because unlike you I been keeping up with me skills instead of playing good with my gay boyfriend. Ryo looked at with a death glare. Oh, don't worry, we been keep good care of him, or should I say our new leader have. He pointed to the rafter above his head. The dark indigo-haired teen looked up. There on the rusty rafter was a person with a black mask, the three of his old gang member, but what caught his eyes was the person in middle. The person who was sitting in a chair, his Fubuki. Ryo was more than happy to see Fubuki. So why is he sleeping? The dark blue eyes teen didn't fail to notice that chocolate-haired teen's eye were close. Oh well, we can't have him, but before Koromaru could finish, Ryo have already punched him in the chin, which sent him flying towards some empty boxes. Every looked down at Ryo who was fixing his coat. He sighed to calm his nerves and looked at his old teammate, then back at Koromaru who's is getting back up. Sorry Koromaru, but I do have schedule keep and I do want to keep it. Ryo let out a laugh. Beside it not like I am going take all my anger out on you, Koromaru. Still, his voice turned old, you did betray me. And you must remember what I told you back then. He turned his head and looked at the other young teens from his old gang. Hell, Kaiser, don't care what your reason are, but you must never betray me. The others felt it, Ryo anger all way up where they stand. Koromaru felt it too, then smiled a evil smile, and rubbed his chin. That sound more like you. He shook his head. Fine, whether or not I win I be happy to face you, Hell Kaiser Ryo. Ryo turned his head back to Koromaru and nodded. The icy hair fighter went into his fighting style, the same for the indigo teen. Both looked at one another, eye to eye. Within a second both of the fighters started. Koromaru tried for a low kick which Ryo jumped into the air and dodged it, then kicked Koromaru in the face. Koromaru back up but recovered fast and tried to punch Ryo. He ducked the punch and hit Koromaru's stomach. Koromaru then knee Ryo's face, which made Ryo back up and giving Koromaru a chance to kick him. Ryo managed to backed away, but Koromaru keep on trying to land a punch, or that what Ryo thought. Koromaru had a plan set up for Ryo and the indigo hair was falling right into. Ryo was keep on walking backwards, tried to look for an opening in Koromaru's attacks, but nothing show itself. Suddenly Ryo felt it, his foot slips and he fall backward on ice. What the? Ryo looked below him and saw that he was standing on a ice area. Koromaru took this moment to grab hold of Ryo and make him goes feather on the ice. Now Ryo knew this was bad. Koromaru had always been able to walk on the ice as if it was ground. So this was your plan. Of course you said use whatever to make it an advantages for us. So now you are in my territory. Koromaru started walk toward Ryo. I doubt you learn how to fight on ice. Koromaru then kicked Ryo in the head, which sent him falling back onto that ice. Ryo tried to sit up when he felt a drop kick landing on his back. Koromaru started to laugh. He then grabbed hold of Ryo's hair and started to punch him. On the rafters, the 14 looked down at the fight below them. While their attention was away, they failed to notice the brownish teen waking up. Koromaru had finally let go of Ryo's hair. Then started to walk away. Ryo knew something was up. Koromaru was never one to leave that job unfinished, so what he is planning. Suddenly Ryo looked over at Koromaru. He was now running towards him. Koromaru jumped into that air. Then Ryo knew what Koromaru was up to. Ryo quick moved out of the way from the drop kick. Damn, Koromaru said while removing his foot from the crack ice. Fubuki blinked a couple of times when he finally noticed that he wasn't in the room. The chocolate-haired teen looked down and he was wearing. To his disgust, it was another girly outfit. This one he didn't like either. It was a black and gray cheerleader uniform. The one thing he liked about it that it was old-fashioned one, so the top was a sweater. He then looked around and noticed it was a factory he was in. Also he saw his captor and his followers in front of him. He moved his head to see what they was looking at. His eyes widened when he saw Ryo fighting. He then looked back up at the others who was really into the fight. Fubuki smiled knowing this was his chance. Ryo managed to dodge another drop kick from Koromaru. That the second time Ryo, you managed to dodge. Ryo was tried to catch his breath. But I shouldn't be surprised considering you teach me how to do it. Now I can even do it better than you. You can see that. Koromaru then run again. This time Ryo knew what was coming, another drop kick, and moved out of the way, but it didn't happen. Koromaru instead slid on the ice and grabbed Ryo's collar and tossed him across the ice and landed hard on the ice. The indigo-haired teen felt it warm liquid coming down from his head. Ryo tried to drag himself off the ice, but Koromaru again grabbed hold of his collar, and tossed him back into the middle. Ryo felt it more blood coming out of his head. Fubuki managed to get to the bottom floor without being noticed. He then made his way to Ryo, trying not get notice. The chocolate-eyed teen hid behind some boxes. His eyes looked at the ice where Ryo was, still losing the battle. Fubuki's eyes widened when he saw blood on ice. Ryo didn't know why, but he could fight. He thought what Koromaru said about him hanging out with Fubuki made him lose his touch. Koromaru come down once again with his signature drop kick. Ryo barely dodged it, and moved towards where Fubuki was. The indigo-haired teen looked up and saw chocolate eyes look back him. Ryu was about to say something. He noticed that Koromaru was above the two. Ryu quickly grabbed hold of Fubuki, missed the drop kick and landing in a pile of boxes. Ryu. Fubuki looked up at Ryo, who was standing above him. Fubuki. Ryu then hugged Fubuki. I glad you okay. The chocolate-haired teen returned the hug. But not the time for this. He left up Fubuki, princess style, and ran before Koromaru can land his drop kick. Koromaru looked up at Ryo, who was still holding Fubuki. The other looked behind them, and noticed the empty chair. That damn, said the mask-figured, bitch. He then looked back at the trio. Well, it's so nice you could join us, Fubuki. Koromaru said in a mocking tone, but you should be back with the leader. I rather be here than with that creep. Fubuki tightened his hold around Ryo's neck. I like it much better here. Well, now that you make this hard. Koromaru rubbed his head, 'cause I not supposed to harm you. Ryu left Fubuki's head up to talk to him. Fubuki, I not sure if I can win. Fubuki looked at Ryo and saw the blood on his face. Well, you in bad shape. I surprised that you having such a hard time. I can't get into it. Get into it. I thought you fight with emotion. Maybe you was worry about me that you was distracted. So then what you are saying is, now that I hear you have a chance. I saw some of the fight and not to make a bad comment, but you suck. Ryo looked at him. Fubuki then laughed. Just think about it. You taught him how to do it. Ryo relied what Fubuki was saying and shook his head. Why didn't I think that? The chocolate hair teen smiled, and removed himself from the indigo hair teen arms. What are you thinking? They would most likely. Fubuki put his finger on Ryo's lip to keep him quiet. I would slow you down and don't worry about me for now, you have to fight. Ryo nodded his head and looked at Koromaru. Oh good, you let him down, so now I could fight you again. Koromaru started to run to where Ryo was standing. Ryo took a deep breath and his gaze changed. Koromaru then jumped into the air and started his drop kick. Ryo dodged it. Then before Koromaru could recover his leg from the ground, Ryo punched him in the face. The icy hair teen was about to fly, but Ryo grabbed hold of him. He then started to kick him in the side. You idiot. Fubuki noticed the change in Ryo's voice. How can I be so stupid to let you even land a punch on me, let alone all those damn drop kick, Koromaru? You should have noticed that he not on ice anymore and I have the advantages over you. Ryo stopped kicking him. You got to use to fighting on ice that you can tell the difference between normal ground and ice anymore. For that, Ryo lifted his fist. You lose. Ryo the pulled back to punch Koromaru. Koromaru closed his eyes and waited for it to come. But nothing happened. He opened his eyes and say Fubuki grabbed hold of Ryo's arm. Ryo. That enough, he defeated. Ryo's eyes softened and he let go of Koromaru's hair. He then looked at the chocolate hair teen. Fubuki. Sorry. Ryo fall limp and Fubuki caught him. Ryo. Fubuki shook Ryo's body. Ryo. He noticed the dire blood on the indigo hair teen's hair. He closely examined the cut on Ryo's head. He sighed in relief. Thank goodness it's not serious. Well, that good to hear. Fubuki froze in place. I am so glad that he okay. The chocolate-eyed teen looked behind him, and he saw Fujiwara behind him. Fubuki tightened his hold on Ryo. Oh how cute Fubuki. Fujiwara removed his mask, but it's time to go. The mustard hair teen grabbed hold of Fubuki's hair. The chocolate hair teen let out a yelp sound. Fujiwara then yanked Fubuki towards him hard and Fubuki fall into his arms. The arms around Fubuki warp around him and Fubuki tried to get free but it wasn't working. Oh don't be a bad child Fubuki, it's time to go back home. No, let go. Ryo. Yelled Fubuki as they started to walk away from Ryo's unconscious body. Ryo. Ryu. Hours later. Fubuki was back in his room with a red mark on his right cheek. His knees was pulled up to his chin. Fujiwara was really mad at everyone, but especially Fubuki. As soon as they forces Fubuki in the car, Fujiwara slapped him really hard enough that it made Fubuki bleed in his mouth. Then as soon as they arrived back at the house, he pushed Fubuki back into the room, and told him he better be ready for punishment. Even though he knew that he was in a serious trouble, he was glad he saw Ryo. It was really worth it because he even got to touch him. He hoped that Ryo was okay and not still in that abandoned factory. Now he was waited for Fujiwara's punishment. Just as he was thinking, the door opened. The mustard blonde teen was in the doorway. Fubuki moved backwards on the bed. Now Fubuki, I spoke to my man and now it's your turn. He walked towards Fubuki, whose was on edge of the bed, didn't like his tone. Fujiwara then jumped on him. Fubuki tried to move out the way but Fujiwara grabbed hold of one of Fubuki's arm. The chocolate hair teen tried to free his hand but only lead to the other one to be captor. Fujiwara then pulled out rope and tied both of Fubuki's hands behind his back. He then flipped Fubuki over, so that he can look at him. Fujiwara's hand touched Fubuki's right cheek. I'm so sorry that I hit you, but you must understand never to do that again. Now it's time. Fujiwara pulled out something behind his back. Fubuki widened when he saw the vibrator in Fujiwara's hand. Fubuki flinched as he felt the other teen hand separating his legs. Fubuki tried to close his legs, but that only ended up with a punch in the gut. Fujiwara let out a wicked smile as he fully dominated Fubuki's body. He pulled down that underwear that the chocolate hair teen was wearing. Once they were off, the mustard color hair teen pulled out a tube. He squeezed out some of the contented on his finger. After rubbing the contented on his fingers, he carefully leaned over the other teen's body once again, and then he whispered in the chocolate-eyed teen's ear. You going to enjoy this? With that said, he placed one of his cover finger up Fubuki's skirts and it made it way into the frightened teen's entrance. Fubuki tried not to let out a sound, but it was hard not to. He felt it one of the cover finger enter him. He let out a yelp as he felt it move around within him. He felt the other finger made it way in. The chocolate eyes teen's tears was falling as the mustard color hair teen started to stretch his entrance. After some time, Fugiwara pulled out his fingers and quickly replaced them with the vibrator. Fubuki let out a cry. Fugiwara moved a bit to look at Fubuki. Fubuki's face was red while Fubuki was letting out heave breaths and his member was already hard. Fujiwara went to the nightstand and opened a key lock top drawer. He grabbed something that Fubuki couldn't see. Fear along with the heat he was feeling was making him dizzy. Fujiwara's hand touched Fubuki's member, which caused the brunette to flinch. "Oh, you are so sensitive." He let out a laugh. "Don't worry, I gonna make sure you feel good for a while." See. Fubuki's eye widened as he saw the cock stopper that had straps. Fujiwara started to place it on Fubuki's member while the chocolate hair teen was moaning. He didn't want to, but he felt so glad feeling that his member was getting attention. Fujiwara smiled as he was finally done. He then got up. "I think it time for you, Fubuki-chan, to have some time to think what you did." He left Fubuki in that state and went on to continue the next part of his plan. Bandit Ice Factory. Ryo eye flutter open. He slowly got up and looked around. He then remember what happened. He remember fainted while Fubuki was holding him. Damn, he clenched his fist. I let him down again. He pulled out Jim's phone and dialed. "Hello," he heard owner of the phone on the other line. "Hey, it me. Yeah, I kind of knew that. What did you find out?" "That my old gang is working with this leader who covered his face with a mask." That kind of crowdedly. "Anyway, what else?" Ryo explained what happened and how he was forced to fight. "Sorry Asuka, I couldn't save him again." "It okay," he heard the blonde. "No doubt you give my brother hope. You are trying to save him and he knows that now." "Thanks." Ryo phone went off. It looked like it time for another round. "Okay, call us back." Ryo hang up the phone and answer the other phone. "What the next round?" "Well, you so eager." "Okay, now this time would cause most things to change forms. It can make sold into something else. Just like the other place, they share the same thing. See you there in 10. Ryo hang up and dial with the other phone. "Hey, I going to the funeral home." "Why there?" Jim asked. "Because it the only place where there incinerator there and it looks like Hanamaru turned to fight me." With that said, Ryo hang up and started to head off once again to fight and try to save his love. Thank you for listening.